They go the full way round, and at times they're actually at the back of the building, obviously, but they swing round and they capture virtually the whole of Station Avenue.
What did you see?
She was never picked up. When you look at CCTV and it points onto a road where we knew that Milly had been, you don't expect not to see her, which was one of the first problems that sort of presented itself to us. And on that day, it was very sunny and it had been raining, so there's water on the lens, and at points in the revolutions of the cameras, the view is obliterated by the sunlight. So again, you have to do further work to try and look through that sunlight to make sure she wasn't captured.
Detectives began researching what could be done to improve the footage. The answer was found over 3,000 miles away.
We went to anybody we could think of that had worked with CCTV, and we didn't limit ourselves to the experts within our country. We wanted to make sure that we could answer that question. You know, where was Milly? Why didn't she appear on that CCTV? So that's why we farmed it out to the FBI.
After working on the footage for 6 long months, the experts at the FBI spotted something.
It was a sports car that was on Station Avenue that was driving sort of towards the railway station. You could see a figure standing next to the passenger window, and they appeared to be talking to the people that were sat inside the car. We actually thought at that point that this could have been Milly.
This blurry image was sent to vehicle specialists who were able to determine the exact make and model. It was a rare Mazda MX-6 sports car. Only around 5,000 of them had been sold in the UK.
At that moment, for you and the rest of the team, did it feel like a breakthrough?
Absolutely, yeah, it did. We obviously put the appeal out in the media for that person to come forward, and they actually phoned up that day and identified themselves, and it actually turned out to be a mum and son innocently in Station Avenue. I think they were going to an estate agent's about a property, so yeah, very quickly it wasn't Milly and it wasn't what we were looking for.
Then, in September, Milly's family received the news that they had been dreading.
Police investigating the disappearance of Amanda Dowler have visited Woodland in Hampshire, where human remains were found on Wednesday.
2 people walking find the remains of a body. How do you hear about that?
They were a couple that would go mushroom picking. They'd gone in there because it was a perfect area for the growing of rare mushrooms, and they would collect them and sell them. And they'd gone into Walton Police Station to report that they'd found what they believed to be Milly Dowler.
Did you go to the site?
Yes, I did, yeah, that night.
When you walked to the site, did you yourself have a feeling?
Yes, I did. I thought that it was Milly.
24 hours later, police confirmed that the remains were those of the missing schoolgirl.
She compared the remains found in Yateley Heath Wood yesterday with the dental records of Amanda Dowler. We can now confirm the results of the examination was almost certainly those of the missing Amanda.
I was in the house and my mum was in the garden, and then my mum just collapsed, and I was just like, oh my goodness. That was just the worst feeling, because there's absolutely nothing you can do. I can't console her. My dad couldn't console her. All she wanted was Milly back, and no one could do anything to help that. Well, we all did.
The investigation was now a murder inquiry.
Did the post-mortem tell you anything about how Milly had died?
It didn't tell us how she died, but we knew that she didn't have any of her clothing and that she had been lain on top of the ground. She hadn't been buried. So we knew it wasn't a natural death.
So the area that you found the body in, what could you learn from that?
As soon as we found Milly, we got certain experts in to look at the wooded area that she'd been found in. And we used pollen experts and also experts that would be able to tell us about the foliage that had grown up around Milly. And they were able to tell us that Milly had been left there in the actual week that she'd gone missing. So we were able to track back to the week of the 21st.
Exactly a year after she had first disappeared, Milly's family could finally lay her to rest.
Just unbelievable amount of sadness, but a sense of relief that no one could hurt her anymore. She was safe and we could say goodbye properly. Now she's safe with the angels and they're looking after her, and I know that she'll be watching down on us, and that gives me strength when I'm having a really bad day.
But for Surrey police, the investigation was far from over.
Inevitably, of course, in the way that the media works, it stops being front-page news. It would be easy for people to get the impression that what happens then is that the investigation is winding down. How was it from the inside?
We never stopped. There was always a core team working on the investigation. I don't think we ever had less than 50 officers at any one time working through those years. We never gave up hope. Never.
And their faith was finally rewarded. When 20 months later the team received a chance phone call, the information provided would radically change the direction of the investigation and provide the crucial breakthrough they had been so desperate for.
The information actually came from the Metropolitan Police, and it was an officer that used to work with Surrey Police, and he transferred to the Metropolitan Police. Now, DCI Sutton was investigating a string of offences within the London area of murders of young girls. And when he was looking through the profile of the person they were looking at for their jobs, Colin Sutton noticed that one of this man's previous addresses was 24 Collingwood Place.
This is the entrance to that address. It's less than 100 yards away from where Milly was last seen.
The senior investigating officer at the time, who took the call, said that the hairs on the back of his neck stood up as they were talking about the person, where this person had lived, how close he'd been to the last sighting of Milly. And the team believed that they had their first real breakthrough.
That person was Levi Bellfield. Bellfield was born on the 17th of May 1968 in Isleworth, southwest London. He lived with his parents and was the youngest of 4. When he was just 10 years old, his father died from a heart attack. Just 3 years later, he committed his first offences: burglary and theft.
It's not something that starts off as a determination to go out and kill. It starts off with learning that some sort of feeling of achievement or self-worth or power is generated by physical aggression. The roots of that are bound to be quite involved and quite complicated. They must have their basis in part in the family, and inevitably it always comes back to his relationship with his parents.
Bellfield left school at the age of 16 and followed in his father's footsteps by training as a mechanic. He later moved into the security industry, working as a doorman and setting up his own car clamping business, often operating illegally.
So what you have is an individual in a state where they will draw on violence to achieve certain objectives in their life. Possibly to begin with, this is in almost semi-legitimate situations, like in Bellfield's case, where he was a bouncer and he was involved in clamping cars and so on, where he needed his physical presence to actually get away with what he was doing.
By the time he reached his 30s, Bellfield had added drugs offences, possession of weapons, violent assaults, and making threats to kill to his convictions. His previous partners knew only too well of his violent temper.
1 minute charming and sweet, and like someone had flicked a switch, he would just go psychotic on you. He'd punch you, bite you, kick you, burn you with cigarettes, all sorts of things, try and push you down the stairs.
He sees women as objects that need to be controlled, and he is willing to use extreme violence in order to get them to behave the way he wants.
You couldn't leave him. He wouldn't allow you to leave him. He ruled my life. You weren't allowed to answer a phone, or the door, open your post or anything without him there.
2 years after Milly was taken, the investigation at last had a potential suspect. But a crucial opportunity was missed.
The area of Collingwood Place, and particularly the door marked number 24, had that come up in your investigations?
No, it would have been involved in the house-to-house that we had conducted at the beginning of the investigation.
So the door would have been knocked on?
Yes, that door was actually knocked on 11 times by our officers, but the door was never answered. And the officers didn't follow up with the letting agency as to who was living in the flat at that time.
When you look back on that now, what do you think?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and things could have been very, very different if we'd actually spoken to him. But also, he could have lied to us and covered his tracks. So our position may have been no different than we are in today.
By the time Bellfield came on to Surrey Police's radar, he was already the prime suspect for 2 murders in southwest London and a possible further 30 assaults on women in the area. The Metropolitan Police investigation into the attacks was called Operation Yedis.
Yedis started as the investigation into the murder of Milly Dowler on the 19th of August 2004 in Twickenham.
22-year-old French student Milly Dowler had moved to the UK in 2002. She lived in a bedsit close to Twickenham Green and worked at a cafe in Richmond.
Milly had been out with friends in Twickenham that night. She'd got the bus home, a short distance to Twickenham Green. In actual fact, she missed her stop and didn't get off of the bus until it reached Fulwell. So she walked back down the road, the same road the bus had come along, and will have taken the shortcut across Twickenham Green. And of course, she only reached halfway before she was murdered.
Milly had been hit around the back of the head with a blunt weapon, possibly a hammer. She was found unconscious and later died in hospital. A temporary police station was set up on Twickenham Green to appeal to the public for help.
We received a lot of information about males with a penchant perhaps for domestic violence. We were passed over 100 names from members of the public, and one of those was Levi Bellfield. When you first meet him, your immediate impression would be that he's a jovial, wants to be your friend. But that belies the fact that he is an extremely violent individual, particularly towards women. He's domineering, overpowering, controlling and possessive, topped off with massive violence.
Bellfield confessed to one of his partners that he hated women and that he had been going out at night looking for them.
And at the back of my old house, there used to be an alleyway that ran alongside of the train tracks.
And once you'd got into the alley, you couldn't get out until you got to the other end. And he told me he used to go down there and wait for people, like try and get a girl on their own. But because there was obviously people coming off trains, there would be quite, too many people, and he wouldn't be able to actually get one on his own, and it used to infuriate him.
As part of the investigation into Milly's murder, detectives also looked at other unsolved attacks in the area to see if any had the same profile. On the 4th of February 2003, 19-year-old Marcia MacDonald was killed on her way home in Hampton, southwest London. Like Milly, she had received a fatal blow to the back of the head, inflicted by a hammer-like weapon. And that wasn't the only connection between the attacks.
There were clear similarities between the attacks on Milly and Marcia. They're both of a similar description. They were late at night, they were both alone, they'd both got off of a bus. The fact that they both received such severe injuries to the head, you have to say, well, it could be the work of one man.
Another attack just a few miles away in Isleworth seemed to demonstrate the extreme violence this man was capable of.
It was my last day of school, so we had a big celebration during the day, which involved a mass and a party afterwards. At the end of the night, me and a couple of friends left the pub. I got on one bus and they got on a different bus going the other direction. At the stop I got off, I was the only person to alight. started to walk home on the same side as I got off.